Welcome to today's deep dive.
Yeah.
Before we really get into the thick of things, I just want to start by offering a divine blessing for your day and, for your entire week ahead.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, may your mind be clear, your heart be open, and, well, may your steps be guided as we explore something truly fascinating together today. We are just so glad you are here with us.
I absolutely echo that blessing. It's a real privilege to be opening up this material today with you.
Right. So, today we are diving into the book of Leviticus.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
Specifically chapter 13. And at a casual glance, this chapter, well, it reads like a really dense, almost alarming ancient medical manual.
It really does. Like, it's all about skin diseases and bodily fluids and even strange mold.
Exactly. But on mission for this deep dive, and we're going to be relying a lot on the detailed historical and theological notes from both the Holman and the NAA study Bibles today.
Right, which are fantastic resources, by the way.
They really are.
Yeah.
So our mission is to bypass that superficial reading.
Yeah.
We want to discover the underlying logic of early public health.
Yeah.
And really look at the social fabric of these ancient communities and the profound mechanisms behind this whole concept of ritual purity.
Which is such a big deal, because to unpack those mechanisms, we first have to kind of ground ourselves in the worldview of the ancient Israelites,
Right. Put ourselves in their shoes.
Exactly. So picture this. They are maintaining this massive encampment out in the wilderness.
Just tents everywhere.
Tents everywhere, but with the tabernacle positioned at the absolute center of it all.
Right.
And for the ancient mind, the physical proximity of a perfectly holy God that required a meticulously guarded state of ritual purity. Like, it wasn't optional.
It was life or death, basically.
Totally.
Right.
And Leviticus 13, well, it serves as the ultimate diagnostic guide to maintaining that boundary between, the holy and the mundane.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how they guarded that boundary, we first have to address what they were guarding against, right?
Right.
And that actually requires dismantling pretty massive historical misunderstanding regarding the disease itself.
Oh, definitely. The translation issue here is huge.
Yeah, so if you read most standard English translations of Leviticus 13, you're going to encounter the word leprosy, like repeatedly.
All over the place.
Right. But the NAA Study Bible makes it explicitly clear that applying our modern medical definition of leprosy to this ancient text is, well, it's a chronological and a biological error.
It really is. We are dealing with a classic case of linguistic drift over centuries.
Linguistic drift. How so?
Well, what modern medicine classifies as leprosy today is actually Hansen's disease,
Right.
which is a specific bacterial infection, affecting the nerves and the skin, respiratory tract, things like that. But according to the historical data in the NAA notes, true Hansen's disease was, well, it was basically unknown in the ancient Middle East during the era when Leviticus was actually codified.
Wait, really? Unknown entirely?
Yeah, references to actual Hansen's disease, they don't even emerge in that region's archaeological or textual record until, like, the first millennium BC, which is significantly later.
Oh, wow. So that vivid Sunday school imagery I have in my head of individuals suffering from, modern Hansen's disease out in the Sinai wilderness, that's just historically inaccurate.
It is, yeah. It's a later projection. The text itself is actually built around a really specific Hebrew word, which is Sarah.
Dara,
Yeah, and the Holman notes detail the really fascinating journey of this word. So when the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek, centuries later to create the Septuagint.
Right, the Greek translation.
Exactly. The translators chose the Greek word lepra to represent Sarah.
And there's the root of leprosy.
There it is. But at the time, lepra simply denoted a condition that made the skin scaly or rough.
Okay, so just a symptom.
Exactly. It was a symptom, not a specific pathogen. And then later on, that Greek term was transliterated into Latin, and eventually it just cemented itself in English as leprosy.
So this is less like an infectious disease ward and more like an ancient, high-stakes version of WebMD where every weird rash or burn gets flagged.
That is actually a great way to look at it, because the original Hebrew term, sara'at, it operated as this broad umbrella category.
Okay.
It encompassed a wide variety of visible, physical alterations on the surface of human skin.
Like what kind of alterations?
Well, we know from later rabbinic writings in the post-exilic period that ancient scholars eventually categorized 72 different specific types of skin conditions that fell under this one single designation.
72.
Oh.
Wow. categorizing 72 distinct variations suggests an intense cultural preoccupation with the surface of the body.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are talking about conditions that today would be diagnosed as like psoriasis or leukoderma.
Leukoderma is the one that causes depigmentation, right? The
Right.
white patches.
Right, exactly. Or even severe hives, localized boils, and even burn wounds that had just scarred over or turned white.
So basically anything out of the ordinary. Why was the ancient mind so deeply fixated on mapping out every minor disruption to the skin's integrity?
Well, that fixation stems from their underlying theological framework. And this is captured by another crucial Hebrew word that the Holman notes really bring to our attention, which is nega.
Nega. Okay, how does that translate?
So it's often translated in English as plague or mark, but the literal translation of nega is a strike or a blow.
A strike.
Yeah, implying a heavy physical impact.
Wow, okay. That paints the picture of an ontological event rather than just like a biological accident.
Yes.
A visible disruption of order on the human body wasn't just a medical inconvenience. It was interpreted as a state of severe affliction that actually disrupted the wholeness of the individual.
Exactly. It signaled a breach in the natural order because in the ancient Near Eastern understanding, physical wholeness was literally a reflection of divine order.
Right, God is order, so the body should be orderly.
Exactly. So a severe spreading rash was a visible manifestation of chaos breaking out on the canvas of the human body.
Chaos on the canvas, I like that.
And that chaos required immediate methodical intervention to prevent it from compromising the ceremonial purity of the broader camp.
Which explains the personnel involved, I guess.
Right.
Because if you wake up in this camp with a suspicious, scaly white patch, you don't seek out an ancient physician.
Nope.
You present yourself to Aaron or one of his sons. You go to a priest.
Right. The priest is the designated diagnostician here, because this is ultimately a question of ritual standing, not therapeutics.
So they aren't treating you.
No, the priest isn't there to offer you a healing salve or like is it some ancient remedy.
Yeah,
He is there to perform an observational audit of your physical wholeness.
an observational audit. And reading through the specific diagnostic criteria in the sources, the methodology is surprisingly clinical for a priest.
It really is. It's very step by step.
Yeah, the priest looks for specific visual markers indicating that the affliction has fundamentally altered the body's baseline. Like he checks to see if the hair inside the infected area has turned white.
Right.
And he examines the lesion to determine if it appears deeper than the surrounding surface of the skin.
And those two specific indicators are so fascinating when you view them through the lens of ancient symbolism.
How so?
Well, hair turning white suggests that the vital life force, the natural pigment and vitality, has been drained from that specific area,
Oh, that makes sense.
and a lesion that appears deeper than the skin. That indicates that the affliction isn't just superficial anymore. It has breached the boundary of the body and is actively invading the person's structural integrity.
Okay, but what if the visual evidence is inconclusive? Say the spot is white, but the hair hasn't lost its pigment, and the lesion is still superficial.
Ah, well, then the priest enforces a strict 7-day quarantine.
Just locks them away for a week.
Yep. And then on the 7th day, the individual is reevaluated. If the spot is unchanged, they undergo a second 7-day quarantine.
If this is a spiritual strike, why are they using such methodical, clinical 7-day observation periods? It seems like a really fascinating collision of religion and ancient dermatology.
It is a collision, but the time frame used here is not arbitrary at all. The Holman Bible notes emphasize that the number 7, along with its derivatives, appears 176 times throughout the book of Leviticus.
176 times.
Yeah. In biblical theology, 7 is the number of completeness and conclusion.
Ah, right, the 7 days of creation.
Exactly. So the 7-day observation period isn't just a medical waiting game to see if a rash fades. It is a ritually complete cycle of time designed to allow the absolute truth of the affliction to, fully reveal itself.
Okay, so this methodical observation period really does force us to reconcile their ancient understanding of the spiritual and the physical.
Totally.
However, the NWA Study Bible raises a massive theological point here regarding how we interpret the priest's final verdict.
Yeah.
When he finally says, impure.
Yes, this is so important. Because we carry this modern bias that equates the word impure with moral sin or divine condemnation.
Right, like God is striking them down for doing something wrong.
Exactly. When a modern reader sees a priest declare a sick person impure, the assumption is that God is punishing a sinner. But the text is clear that ritual impurity is fundamentally distinct from moral guilt.
So it's not about sin.
No, the priest is not rendering a judgment on the state of the person's soul.
Right. The impurity is a state of being, not a moral failing.
Yes, exactly.
The priest really functions as a public health official whose primary metric is just ceremonial cleanliness. He's actively guarding the sacred space of the tabernacle from anything that represents decay or death.
Exactly. The entire system is built to contain spreading corruption. But within this highly logical framework of measuring depth, checking hair color, implementing quarantine cycles, there is a specific rule that completely subverts our modern logic of how quarantine should operate.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because Leviticus 13, verses 12 and 13, outline a scenario where the disease spreads so rapidly that it covers the entire body, like from the top of the head to the soles of the feet.
Head to toe.
Right. And the priest examines the person, sees that their skin has turned completely white, and declares them ritually clean.
Clean and pure, free to remain in the camp.
Okay, let me see if I can map out this logic, because it feels like a total paradox.
It does.
If an individual has a small, localized spot on their arm that meets the criteria, they are declared impure and exiled.
Yep.
But if the disease has entirely taken over the host, turning them completely white, they are given a clean bill of ritual health. Like, wait, if the disease is absolutely everywhere, you're fine. That feels completely backwards.
I know, it sounds crazy. But to understand the mechanism behind this paradox, we have to look really closely at the text's stipulation regarding raw flesh.
Raw flesh. Okay.
Yeah, the scripture notes that while the fully white person is clean, the exact moment raw flesh appears in the condition, they revert to being impure again.
Oh, I see.
Think of it through the analogy of a forest fire.
Okay, I like where this is going.
When a forest fire is actively burning, spreading and consuming new timber, it is in a state of active chaos and destruction.
Right.
That is the equivalent of the raw flesh. The condition is actively breaking out, it's bubbling up, it's ulcerating. It represents an ongoing state of physical decay and a loss of wholeness. The boundary of the skin is actively being breached.
So it's the actual process of breaking down that generates the impurity.
Exactly. But once the fire has burned through the entire forest, there is nothing left to consume. The active threat is over.
The fire is out.
Right. The landscape is entirely altered. It's covered in white ash, but it has reached a new, stable baseline. Similarly, once the skin condition has fully expressed itself across the entire body, turning into a uniform, dry flakiness with no exposed raw flesh, the active outbreak has concluded.
So the body is no longer actively deteriorating in a way that symbolizes death.
Exactly. Because the active decay has ceased, the ritual impurity basically vanishes with it.
That is a brilliant mechanism. It perfectly illustrates that this is a symbolic language concerning wholeness, order, and life, rather than just a, pathogen containment strategy.
It's totally symbolic.
And understanding that symbolic language is essential to grasping the devastating reality for those who are declared impure, because they harbored that active raw decay.
Yes. The social and psychological toll prescribed by these texts is just staggering.
It's so harsh.
It is. Upon being officially declared impure by the priest, an individual was immediately expelled from the camp. They were forced to live in total isolation outside the protective bounds of the community.
And in the context of the ancient wilderness, that isolation wasn't just lonely. It was a literal existential threat.
Oh, absolutely.
You were severed from your family, your economic support, the physical safety of the collective. But the physical exile is only half the tragedy.
Right, the visual marker.
Yeah, the visual and behavioral markers they were mandated to adopt are just heartbreaking. The text requires the impure person to tear their clothes, let their hair hang unkempt and loose, cover their upper lip to muffle their face,
And cry out, impure, impure,
Yeah.
to warn anyone approaching them.
right?
And when we cross-reference those specific behavioral mandates with the broader cultural practices of the Old Testament, a really chilling realization emerges.
What's that?
Tearing garments, loosening hair, and covering the lower face. Those are the exact prescribed ancient rituals of mourning for the dead.
Oh, wow. Which means the community was essentially forcing the afflicted person to officiate their own funeral.
Exactly. The Holman Bible notes highlight this profound connection. The person suffering from an active Surat condition was considered ritually dead to the community.
Ritually dead.
By adopting the posture of a mourner, they became a walking monument to their own social and ceremonial demise.
That is so dark.
And that continuous cry of impure, it wasn't merely a practical warning so people wouldn't touch them. It was a devastating verbal reinforcement of their severed status from the land of the living.
The weight of that isolation is just immense. It underscores how aggressively the ancient Israelites guarded the presence of God against anything symbolizing death or, the breaking down of the natural order.
They took it incredibly seriously.
And this theological framework of active decay was so potent that it didn't even stop at the edge of the human epidermis. Like the ancient mind didn't draw a hard line between biological integrity and material integrity.
No, they really didn't. That seamless transition from the biological to the material is, I think, one of the most striking features of Leviticus.
Yeah.
The text moves directly from diagnosing human skin conditions to establishing a diagnostic protocol for fabrics.
Like clothes.
Right, specifically wool, linen, and even leather items.
The sources outline a pretty rigorous set of laws for wardrobe management, honestly. If a greenish or reddish spot materialized on a wool tunic or a leather vessel, the owner didn't just scrub it with lye.
Right.
They brought the item directly to the priest, who served as the diagnostician for material goods just as he did for human bodies.
And the protocol mirrors the human diagnostic process almost identically. The priest examines the discoloration and locks the garment in quarantine for 7 days.
Another complete cycle of evaluation.
Yep.
And after those 7 days, if the greenish or reddish spot has spread, the priest declares it a malignant leprosy of the garment.
Right.
And the result is absolute eradication. The item is thrown into a fire and completely burned.
Completely destroyed.
But if the spot hasn't spread, the item is washed and subjected to a second 7-day quarantine. If the spot remains unchanged in color after that second period, even if it hasn't spread an inch, it is still declared impure and consigned to the flames.
The absolute refusal to tolerate any lingering ambiguity shows how deeply they feared this contamination. The NWA Study Bible notes clarify that from a modern perspective, the cause of these material afflictions was obviously fungus, mildew, or mold.
Right. Which begs the question, why go to such extreme lengths, destroying valuable clothing and leather goods over a patch of common mildew?
It seems like an overreaction to us.
Yeah, this is like a highly spiritualized version of finding toxic black mold in your basement. You literally have to throw your favorite leather jacket into a fire if the priest says it's unclean.
Yeah.
We see mold today as a nuisance, maybe a property value issue, but certainly not a spiritual crisis.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it all comes back to the concept of the forest fire we talked about, the active consumption of wholeness.
Oh, right.
Any spreading fungus, mildew, or mold represents active decay. It is a visible organism breaking down a useful, whole object.
Yeah.
In their worldview, whether it was on skin or wool, the presence of decay in everyday objects fundamentally threatened the ceremonial purity of the entire community just as much as a skin disease did.
Right.
There was no category for just physical.
So the physical state of their clothing, the health of their skin, the structural integrity of their leather goods, it was all a unified canvas.
Exactly.
Decay is the antithesis of life. And since God is the ultimate source of life, permitting decay to fester within the camp, even on a piece of wool, was just a complete affront to the divine presence dwelling in the tabernacle.
It is a remarkable unified system of thought, isn't it? It transforms Leviticus 13 from a bizarre medical oddity into this profound meditation on wholeness, order, and the immense responsibility of living in close proximity to the divine.
It really does.
The Israelites utilized the state of their physical health and their physical possessions as a mirror reflecting spiritual truths about boundaries.
We obviously don't practice these specific Levitical diagnostic laws today. But the underlying human psychology of this text, the instinct to aggressively protect the center of the camp by pushing the afflicted to the margins, well, it leaves us with a highly relevant, deeply challenging question.
It does. When we examine these ancient people, quarantining those who are afflicted, forcing them to wear the garments of the dead, we really have to interrogate our own modern equivalents of quarantines and social isolation.
Right.
Do we today still subconsciously conflate physical illness, mental struggles, or simply the reality of being different with a kind of unspoken moral impurity?
Do we construct invisible boundaries that push people outside our social circles, treating them as if their affliction or their difference is a reflection of their ultimate worth?
Exactly. The ancient Israelites implemented these harsh social boundaries out of a strict, codified ceremonial law meant to protect the literal dwelling place of God. But when we isolate the vulnerable and push people outside the camp today, we have to ask ourselves what exactly it is we think we are protecting.
That is a brilliant thought to sit with. We may have developed modern medicine to cure conditions the ancient world could only fear, but the human instinct to isolate the afflicted and aggressively guard our own clean social camps is a deeply ingrained mechanism we still grapple with today.
It is absolutely something to reflect on long after the deep dive ends.
Well, that brings us to the conclusion of our exploration into Leviticus chapter 13. We have navigated the meticulous ancient diagnostic criteria, uncovered the linguistic journey of the term leprosy, and explored the profound ancient pursuit of wholeness through both body and fabric.
It's been quite the journey.
Thank you so much for joining us on this intellectual journey today. We want to say goodbye by explicitly stating that God blesses all of you, the listeners. May you walk in wholeness and true community this week. We will catch you on the next deep dive.